it would be neither the fold or the unfold that would constitute the active mechanism, but something like the superfold, as borne out by the foldings proper to the chains of the genetic code and the potential of silicon in third-generation machines. The forces within man enter into a relation with forces from the outside, those of silicon, which supersedes carbon, or genetic components which supersede the organism. In each case, we must study the operations of the superfold, of which the double helix is the best known example. So still quite enigmatic, but that's the main place where we get the image of the superfold. So scattered across the postscript and these other texts that I've tried to cite for you here is a new image of society and the self that cannot simply be reduced to Deleuze's previous tropes, like the body without organs, the rhizome, or I would say even the virtual. This is a new image that involves and even requires the recognition of the computer as its central mitigating factor. So just as the fold was Deleuze's diagram for the modern subject of the Baroque period, the superfold is the new active mechanism, he says, for life within computerized control society. This is a quote. A fold is always folded within a fold, like a cavern in a cavern. That's how he described the kind of ontology that is depicted in Leibniz. Going on, the unit of matter, the smallest element of a labyrinth, is the fold, not the point, which is never a part, but a simple extremity of the line. So although he doesn't sort of specify what he means right here, I think we can extrapolate that the superfold, being, as I said, proper to the chains of the genetic code and the progeny of a, quote, unlimited diversity of combinations, I think we could say that it would follow a kind of diagrammatic logic of dispersive, distributive relationships between networks, maybe of a kind of iterative regress via computational recursion. Right? I love that. Recursion is always like bad for philosophers and great for programmers. I always love it. Instead of the human coming into a relationship with itself, which is the Baroque mode, the human comes into a relation with forces from the outside, the silicon of the computer chip, or exogenous factors from genetic engineering, genetic therapies, you might say. The individual, therefore, does not so much carry pleats in its soul, as Deleuze says of the Baroque subject, but, if you will, a kind of tessellated, recombinant soul, if indeed soul is still the proper word, forming and reforming across a metastable skein of the bioinformatic ecosystem. So you might say that this is not so exotic of an argument. And certainly in France, figures like André Leroi-Gourhan or Bertrand Gilles had already demonstrated how human beings co-evolve with their exogenous technologies and techniques. And in North America, of course, figures like Lewis Mumford and Marshall McLuhan had made very similar claims. And I think that the ending of Deleuze's book on Foucault, in fact, reads almost exactly like Donna Haraway's now quite famous Cyborg Manifesto. If you look at them together, they're very similar. Indeed, what might be what might in fact be exotic about Deleuze's argument, or at least what makes it novel, is his mobilization of the concept in terms of a diagram. The superfold, the double helix, the fractal topography, not simply a folded. But as I have been suggesting all along, and this is how I'll end, the ultimate lesson to be learned from the postscript on control societies is not so much a lesson about the subject, or even about society. The ultimate lesson is one about periodization. For what Deleuze wishes to do, I think, in this essay, following Lyotard and Foucault and some of the other people I mentioned at the outset, is to assert the historical break. He wants to show us how everything has changed. Indeed, that the world of 1990 has itself changed from the world of 1968, or prior to 1968. Changed so dramatically as to be practically indistinguishable. The key thing, this is a quote, is that we're at the beginning of something new. It is not particularly important whether one agrees or disagrees with the Foucauldian Deleuzean periodization that goes from the sovereign society through the disciplinary society and then to control society. I maintain that periodization itself is the important detail. And of course, how very ironic that in recent years, periodization seems to be appearing with increased frequency, and we could maybe talk about a kind of increased periodicity of periodization. I wonder where this is all heading. And indeed, all this talk of the superfold is, by that very same measure, a kind of super periodization without end. For each new fold is a new historical break. First the fold, then the double fold, the triple, on up to the multiplicative folds of the superfold. So the task of historical thinking itself is implicated in Deleuze's postscript, and as such has metastasized and reduplicated into a kind of superstate of recursive channels. The ultimate coup, therefore, of control society is not so much the continuous influence of the border crossing, the passport control check, not so much the influence of data mining or facial recognition algorithms, but that it has eviscerated history. Not by banning dissent, but by accelerating the opportunities and channels for critical thought to infinity, and therefore making it impossible to think historically in the first place. So I would say that the central challenge within control society will be not simply to resist the various new nefarious control apparatuses, but to rescue this history from its own consummation. So thanks very much, and I'd be happy to have some kind of, unstructured discussion, questions and answers. Thanks a lot.